After decades of silence, Hank Williams Jr., now 76 years old, has broken his silence on the subject of his real relationship with Waylon Jennings. What transpired between these two legendary outlaw country singers behind the scenes has been a topic of fan speculation for years. Were they merely partners in an enterprise? Or was there something more profound, intimate, and intricate at work? When Waylon died, why didn't Hank Jr. say anything? What is he revealing at this moment that has everyone taken aback? Nobody was expecting this long-awaited confession. Numerous folks were astonished to learn numerous unspoken truths now that Hank is speaking up. Plus, it's going to blow your mind. From country icon to tragic Hank Williams Jr. is still going strong at age 76, and he's one of the most important and influential people in American music. Tragic events in his life, attempts to reinvent himself musically, and the decades-long struggle to establish his own identity in the shadow of a legendary figure have all impacted his life trajectory. Randall Hank Williams came into this world on May 26, 1949, in Shreveport, Louisiana, with a name that would go on to be both a blessing and a curse. His path in life was practically scripted for him as the sole offspring of country music legend Hank Williams Sr. Few, however, could have foreseen the path's unprecedented turbulence and revolutionary impact. Tragically, Hank Jr.'s father passed away in 1953 when he was just 3 years old. A long emotional and musical shadow was cast on Hank Sr.'s son's upbringing by his death at the young age of 29. Hank Jr.'s mother, Audrey Williams, exposed him to the music business when he was very young. Being prepared to continue his father's work, he began performing his father's songs on stage at the tender age of 14, mesmerizing audiences with his uncanny likeness and voice similarities to the country great. The music industry catered to fans' desires for Hank Williams' legacy to keep the music going. Between 1964 and 1974, Hank Jr. put out a string of music that was very similar to his dad's. He achieved some commercial success and celebrity as a result of this, but it also caused him to struggle internally. He was fighting an inner battle of artistic isolation and a profound loss of identity behind the scenes. Expectations to emulate a man he hardly knew were stifling him. In his personal and professional life, he felt immense pressure to live up to the Hank Williams name. In 1975, his life took a sharp turn after a near-fatal mountain climbing mishap in Montana. Hank Jr. hiked around Ajax Peak until he fell over 500 feet, injuring his skull badly. Extensive facial reconstruction and many procedures were performed on him. Not only did it put his life in danger, but it also marked a turning point in his professional life. After this, Hank Jr. resolved he would take his place alongside his famous father. He started to reimagine himself according to his own standards after receiving a fresh lease on life and a more determined sense of purpose. By the late 1970s, Hank Jr. had taken a daring musical turn, fusing elements of outlaw country, southern rock, and blues. This fusion was a watershed moment in his career. He was no longer beholden to his father's fan base or the Nashville elite. Instead, he began to write and perform songs that mirrored his own defiant personality and outlook on life. In 1979, he released Family Tradition, an album that cemented his position as a southern rock-influenced country superstar, and this new phase of his career blossomed. Hank Jr. and others who had dared to go against the grain found inspiration in the title track, which became an anthem for them. Whiskey Bent and Hellbound, All My Rowdy Friends, Have Settled Down, and A Country Boy Can Survive were just a few of Hank Williams Jr.'s many big hits in the 1980s, when he was a country music superstar. A diverse fan base spanning generations was drawn to his gritty lyrics, honest personality, and electrifying live performances. From 1987 until 1990, he was not just carrying on the family legacy, but rewriting it. Numerous accolades, including the prestigious Entertainer of the Year title, were bestowed upon him by the Academy of Country Music and the Country Music Association in recognition of his exceptional talent. With these honors, he completed the transition from legendary son to legendary legend. Even more people started paying attention to Hank Jr. in 1989. He introduced his boisterous, unrepentant approach to millions of football fans weekly with his performance of Monday Night Football's theme song, All My Rowdy Friends Are Coming Over Tonight, which became famous in American sports broadcasting. Monday Night Football's affiliation with Hank Jr. became a cultural landmark, further solidifying his image as an authentic, down-to-earth everyman. Hank Jr. also embraced fatherhood away from the limelight. Catherine Williams Dunning, his daughter, was born to him in 1991. Amidst the mayhem of the music business, his family remained his first priority. Unfortunately, another tragedy befell Catherine in 2020, when she was only 27 years old and killed in a vehicle crash. Tragically, Hank Jr.'s death rocked the Williams family and brought attention back to the public's awareness of the hardships he had faced. Hank Williams Jr. persisted through life and music despite this tremendous personal tragedy. Consistently recording and touring throughout the 2000s and 2010s, he remained a powerful figure in the country music scene. He was a divisive figure in conservative political circles due to his music and his outspoken opinions. No matter how his supporters felt about his politics, they could not dispute his sincerity and defiance of contemporary norms. The long overdue honor of being inducted into the Walkway of Stars at the Country Music Hall of Fame finally came for Hank Jr. in 2016. His ability to carve out a unique niche for himself in the genre, while simultaneously shrugging off the influence of his famous father, earned him this accolade. But in 2020, it received much more notice. When the Country Music Hall of Fame officially inducted him, fans and colleagues alike rejoiced upon the announcement's public release in 2021 after it had been postponed owing to the pandemic. A career marked by tenacity, uniqueness, and innovative creativity came to a close for many with it. Rich White Honky Blues, Hank Jr.'s 2022 album, was a surprising return to his roots for fans. It was a change from his previous career's stadium-ready country rock, and it was produced by Dan Auerbach of the Black Keys. As an alternative, it featured unfiltered blues that drew from his early influences and his strong Southern roots. Acclaimed by critics and listeners alike, the album demonstrated that Hank Williams Jr. could continue to develop as a musician. Even after all these years of work, Hank Williams Jr.'s most divisive problems, his illustrious career has been distinguished by many achievements, but it has not been free of controversy. His reputation and resiliency have been tested on occasion by the controversy, public attention, and personal struggles that have trailed after his chart-topping successes and awards. Even after his ongoing involvement in politics and music in 2023 and 2024, these more contentious episodes will always be a part of the complicated story of one of the most divisive individuals in country music. His 2011 split from Monday Night Football, which had lasted for decades, was one of the most talked-about scandals in Hank Jr.'s career. All My Rowdy Friends Are Coming Over Tonight, his famous opening theme tune, has been ingrained in American sports culture since the late 1980s. But in a live interview on Fox News, Fox and Friends, Hank Jr. stunned viewers and reporters with a political comparison. Hank Jr. liked Ned the golf outing between then-President Obama and Republican Speaker John Boehner to Hitler's round with Netanyahu. An immediate wave of criticism followed the contentious remark. Monday Night Football's airing network, ESPN, quickly removed his theme music after finding the comments offensive. The network formally broke relations with him after more than 20 years of partnership. Hank Jr. decided to stand firm instead of wavering. His new protest single, Keep the Change, is full of rebellious energy that betrayed his contempt for what he saw as the overreach of government regulation and conservative ideology. People who shared his political views, in particular, took to the song as a rallying cry. But it also drove a wedge between him and his moderate and progressive admirers, who were outraged by his remarks and his aggressive reaction. Hank Jr.'s public image, beyond that of a musician, took a nosedive after the incident. On the other hand, as a public personality whose opinions are becoming more divisive, Hank Jr.'s political opinions have been in the spotlight before. His fiery and outspoken political statements kept him in the news throughout the 2010s and into the 2020s. At a concert in 2012, he accused President Obama of despising America and called the president the enemy. The comment sparked further public outcry and made some wonder where celebrities should draw the line when discussing politics. Many others saw Hank Jr.'s promotion of dangerous or reckless conspiracy theories and his open alignment with nationalist ideology as signs of his growing support for far-right movements. Not only did these views draw criticism from prominent media sources, but they also alienated some of his fan base. His remarks caused division and seemed excessively extreme to some followers, while others respected his courage to say what was on his mind. But Hank Jr. didn't seem to care about the backlash. In fact, he frequently dismissed the criticism as an assault on his First Amendment rights. Regardless of the consequences to his career or personal life, he saw himself as a truth-teller in this age of PC. There was a far more personal and devastating struggle that Hank Williams Jr. endured long before his political remarks became prominent. He used drugs and alcohol as a coping mechanism in the 1970s, when he was going through a bad patch emotionally and professionally. He descended into a pit of self-destruction as a result of the immense burden of his father's heritage and his own inner yearning to be heard. His unpredictable behavior and future were both jeopardized by his substance consumption, which he battled on a daily basis. Later on, he said that this was when he struck rock bottom. During this time of profound inner conflict, he nearly died in a mountain climbing accident in 1975. The psychological and emotional effects might have been much more devastating than the physical harm. Hank Jr. would look back on the fall with regret, but he still considers it a defining moment that made him question his purpose in life and his professional trajectory. Even if he didn't get well right away, that set in motion a process of personal and musical metamorphosis. Reclaiming his life was his new musical identity, which he embraced after achieving sober. A tragic event still had an impact on Hank Jr.'s private life, even as he worked to restore his profession and image. Catherine Williams Dunning, his daughter, was killed in a terrible vehicle accident in June of 2020 when she was 27 years old. Those closest to Hank Jr. could feel the emotional toll of the loss, even if he kept a low profile in public. Shortly after her passing, the family was once again the center of attention, this time due to a lawsuit. Claiming mismanagement of assets and raising concerns about control and distribution of funds, Catherine's widower filed a civil case concerning the estate and insurance. Although the case did not remain front and center for very long, it further complicated an already tragic period in Hank Jr.'s life. Public discussion has been prompted by Hank Jr.'s support for gun rights, in addition to his personal and political troubles. His blatantly pro-gun views, which he frequently conveys in fiery and confrontational language, have garnered criticism, especially in light of recent mass murders and the increasing national discourse about gun violence. But he has not been involved in a conventional scandal. Some have been disturbed by his statements regarding the Second Amendment, while others have found them inspiring because they imply armed resistance or rebellion against the government. His backers see these remarks as an unwavering commitment to protecting American liberties. Their detractors see them as a sign of the perilous growth of polarizing political rhetoric. In country music, Waylon Jennings was a visionary. Living life on his own terms in a business that frequently demanded conformity, Waylon Jennings' narrative is one of determination, perseverance, and defiance. The road to genuine country music authenticity can be a bumpy one, as Hank Williams Jr.'s story has proved. Only Waylon Jennings dared to walk it. Waylon was fighting his personal issues and changing the genre from the inside out, while Hank Jr. was emerging from his famous father's shadow. All things considered, they were the embodiment of the outlaw country movement's ideals. The genre didn't exist when Waylon began his adventure, though. The early years of Waylon Arnold Jennings, who was born on June 15, 1937, in Littlefield, Texas, were characterized by both musical inquisitiveness and hardship. At the tender age of 8, he picked up a guitar, displaying the innate skill that would propel him to stardom in country music. He began his career as a disc jockey at a nearby radio station when he was just 14 years old, an apprenticeship that would shape his distinctive voice and expose him to the ins and outs of music broadcasting. Waylon gained the self-assurance to forge his own musical path and exposure to various musical forms from his formative years spent behind the microphone. Joining Buddy Holly's band in 1958 as a bassist was a watershed moment in Waylon's career. The chance encounter thrust him into the center of the emerging rock and roll culture, a realm distinct from the honky-tonk clubs of Texas. However, Waylon would also make a decision that would change the course of his life at this period. Ever since the day another member of the band needed to go on a charter jet on February 3, 1959, the day the music died, Waylon has refused to take a seat. Tragically, the Big Bopper, Buddy Holly, and Ritchie Valens were all killed in that plane disaster. Throughout his career, Waylon's darker themes were fueled by the tragedy, which tormented him for decades. "God Almighty, I thought I caused it for years," he stated at one point. The music industry in the 1960s was confused about how to use Waylon, so he spent the decade trying to find his place. He had some success with his recordings, which fused rockabilly and classic country styles. While working with legendary producer Chet Atkins at RCA Victor, he became disillusioned with the Nashville sound's limitations very soon after signing on. Waylon wanted a more gritty, authentic sound while Nashville promoted clean-cut imagery and rich orchestrations. He wanted more than just the opportunity to sing songs. He wanted creative control over their production and tone. Ladies Love Outlaws, released in 1972, was the pinnacle of such rebellion. The album disregarded the norms of the industry in favor of an honesty and raw sound. The outlaw country movement got its start with this record. Waylon was part of a new wave of country musicians like Willie Nelson, Johnny Cash, and Chris Christopherson who were challenging traditional norms and finding an audience among the disillusioned and defiant. In addition to challenging Nashville's authority, the movement provided a platform for musicians who wished to address the working class of America directly, without euphemisms or filters. With honky-tonk heroes, Waylon broke through in 1973. This album was different from his previous ones since he recorded it independently and with his own band. Billy Joe Shaver was largely responsible for penning the songs, which struck a chord with listeners because to their honesty and raw emotion. It was Waylon's creative zenith, and it proved that genuine storytelling and creative autonomy could coexist with commercial success. From a musical, personal, and cultural perspective, the record was a statement of independence. Throughout the 1970s, Waylon's star kept rising. He was a member of the Outlaws and worked with Willie Nelson on their 1976 platinum-certified album Wanted. Not only did Waylon achieve a watershed moment, but the entire genre did as well. The album's success proved the outlaw strategy was right and solidified Waylon's position as a major figure in country music. It was more than simply music. He was taking on and defeating a system. After landing the roles of narrator and theme song singer for the smash TV series The Dukes of Hazzard in 1980, Waylon's celebrity skyrocketed. He was introduced to a wider audience and solidified his image as a rough, no-nonsense outlaw with his gravelly voice, which became synonymous with the show's rebellious ethos. Good Old Boys, the theme tune, became a classic the moment it was played. It enriched Waylon's cultural legacy in yet another way. In 1983, 3 years down the road, he became a member of the Highwaymen supergroup alongside Johnny Cash, Willie Nelson, and Chris Christopherson. Artistic independence, solidarity, and rebellion were all encapsulated by the band. They were four of the most recognizable voices in country music's history, and they worked together to reimagine the genre. In the 1990s, Waylon's health started to deteriorate, and he stopped releasing music as often. Over time, the toll of a hard life, addiction, and the constant speed of the road became apparent. He struggled with diabetes and had several health complications. However, he maintained his status as an esteemed industry veteran even as he stepped away from the limelight. On occasion, he persisted in touring. He frequently collaborated with other legendary figures, and his impact on aspiring artists of the next generation was profound. Waylon Jennings was elected into the Country Music Hall of Fame in 2001, which is considered one of the greatest awards in country music. A career that had consistently challenged norms was finally acknowledged in that moment. The fact that an artist might triumph over an entire industry while demanding freedom was demonstrated by Waylon. His legacy was solidified, and his music had influenced generations. In Chandler, Arizona, at the age of 64, Waylon died on February 13, 2002, from complications associated with diabetes, bringing an end to his odyssey. His passing closed a chapter in country music's annals, but his impact lives on. Songs of freedom, heartbreak, love, and defiance are among his many legacies. Beyond that, he laid the groundwork for an independent artist's path. Waylon's heroin problem, shame, and defiance in the face of corporate pressures. Waylon Jennings' life was distinguished by a string of public disputes and deeply personal challenges, even though it was also marked by musical creativity and cultural impact. While he did much to alter the style and tone of country music, he also overcame obstacles that nearly ended his career. The type of polished headlines that come with selling out concerts and platinum records weren't here. These convoluted realities molded the man and his legacy. They were also raw, painful, and real. Jennings was never afraid to admit when he was wrong. He chose to wear them like scars instead, tangible evidence of a life lived on the brink. Tragic events likely gave rise to the first and longest-lasting emotional burden that Waylon Jennings bore. Waylon quit his seat on a small charter that carried Buddy Holly, Ritchie Valens, and the Big Bopper on February 3, 1959, better known as the day the music died. Everyone on board that plane perished in the crash. Making an impromptu adjustment to suit a bandmate ended up causing me immense suffering for the rest of my life. What may have been plagued Jennings for many years. He was very forthcoming about the shame in his autobiography in later years. According to his account, Holly had made a joke about Jennings' age and said, "I hope your old bus freezes up." In response, Jennings had said, "Well, I hope your old plane crashes." For a long time, those careless remarks lingered in his thoughts. There was more to the survivor's remorse than meets the eye. It was inevitable that it would permeate his music and become deeply ingrained in his emotional personality. There was more agony to come. Addiction was a major problem for Jennings throughout the 1970s and 1980s, when he was at the peak of his outlaw celebrity. He was upfront about his extensive cocaine use and how he would spend up to $1,500 a day on his habit. He was not hiding the fact that he used drugs from anyone. The legend of the outlaw included it. It was common for fans and fellow musicians to romanticize the mayhem. Behind the scenes, though, Jennings was on the verge of collapse. He became a metaphor for self-destruction as well as artistic defiance. When the DEA arrested him for possessing cocaine in 1977, it was a clear sign that his lifestyle choices had consequences. The arrest garnered worldwide attention, even though the charges were subsequently dismissed due to insufficient evidence. Fans who had grown to respect Jennings for his honesty and autonomy found it a humbling experience. It was just another sign to Jennings of how far he had gone from where he had come from. He kept up his outlaw persona in public, but behind closed doors he was struggling with a downward spiral of debt, health problems, and the realization that the lifestyle he had popularized was also engulfing him. There was more to Jennings' image as a renegade than just his actions. One of the most contentious issues that shaped his career was his ongoing feud with Nashville's elite. The major labels, especially RCA, and producers like Chet Atkins pushed a formulaic style on Jennings, who fought against it from the start. The opportunity to work with his own band was something that Jennings really desired. Choose his own sources and mold his own style. His defiance was considered as radical and even insulting at a period when artists were expected to adhere to the rules. Many in the industry saw him as harsh or ungrateful once these conflicts became public and controversial. The battle, however, was about artistic integrity for Jennings, not ego. He thought country music had strayed too far from its roots in the working class and was becoming overly commercialized. There were repercussions for his defiance of Nashville's authority. A lot of obstacles were in the way of achieving freedom. Jennings was on the verge of bankruptcy in the late 1970s and early 1980s due to financial mismanagement, which was worsened by his drug habit. At times, the very system he battled against had also protected him from falling, offering structure, success, steadiness. When he was finally on his own, he had to deal with the fact that his career was in utter disarray. The consequences of his addiction, he came to realize later on, extended far beyond the narcotics themselves. It encompassed shattered relationships, lost chances, and poor business dealings. Though it had its advantages, living as an outlaw was not without its costs. The unspoken truth about Waylon is unveiled by Hank. Hank Williams Jr., who is 76 years old now, has spoken publicly about a friendship that shaped country music for a whole generation. He finally breaks his silence after years of keeping quiet to discuss the deep friendship he had with Waylon Jennings, a partnership that was formed through music, but also through shared hardships, triumphs, and admiration. Many have wondered how close they are to one another for a long time. Many people's suspicions were confirmed today by Hank Jr. They were really close buddies, and it affected them both in ways that would last a lifetime. Though they were both artists, Waylon was more than that. He was a mentor and a soulmate, as Hank Jr. reflected on their formative years together. Despite being a friend, Waylon was more. He served as both an ally and a guide. He was sympathetic to my plight and was there for me no matter what. Their paths in life were parallel, and they were both guys who lived under the weight of lofty expectations. Hank Jr. in the role of country music icon's son, together with Waylon as an innovator defying Nashville's regimented structure. There was more than meets the ear in their duet on The Conversation. It was an honest and exposed moment. They were able to deal with the magnitude of Hank Williams Sr.'s legacy in the song. One of their most lauded collaborations, the song's unfiltered honesty resonating with audiences as Waylon asked the topics that countless admirers had long pondered. There was more to it than that. It was an honest discussion between two guys who were very forthright with one another. In one of the most moving anecdotes that Hank Jr. told, Waylon made a very personal gesture. According to Hank Jr., "Those boots meant the world to me," after receiving a pair of antique nudie cone cowboy boots from Waylon, who had previously belonged to Hank Sr. "They symbolized my roots and the people who supported me during my journey." This wasn't a fashion present for Hank Jr., it represented the unconscious connection they had as two guys with burdens from their histories, and it was about heritage. Also, Hank Jr. didn't sugarcoat Waylon's problems. The outlaw persona Waylon had cultivated wasn't an act, he conceded. It was his way of life, and there were moments when it cost him dearly. There was drug usage and encounters with the law. The struggles for artistic autonomy were witnessed by Hank Jr. directly. However, he chose to show his admiration for Waylon's tenacity rather than pass judgment. He reminisced about the notorious DEA raid that became a part of their mutual legend and served as the inspiration for Waylon's songs "Bits Done," "Got Out of Hand," and "Don't You Think This Outlaw." As Hank Jr. put it, that song wasn't a joke. That was the actual world. The ups and downs of fame, riches, and their own problems challenged their partnership throughout the years. It was, however, undamaged. As guys attempting to make sense of life, they were there for each other beyond their shared musical interests. In his interview, Hank Jr. recalled how Waylon had gotten him through the worst of times by showing him that just surviving was a triumph in and of itself. Little speech was required of us. There was instant rapport just by sharing a physical space. In other words, Waylon was legit. With the passage of time and changes in the music industry, both men become more vocal about their belief in the fading popularity of classic country music. Hank Jr. remembered how he and Waylon often bemoaned the commercialization of the music in their chats. Country music, in their view, should not be about radio-friendly hooks, but rather about being raw, real, and based on true stories. Even when they weren't singing, their voices were perfectly harmonized in those instances. Hank Jr. said it hurt to see his friend's health deteriorate in the late 1990s. Once a man of boundless vitality, Waylon started to slow down as he battled diabetes and the physical toll of an arduous life. While Hank Jr. dealt with his own problems, he remained nearby and provided support in subtle but significant ways. Hank Jr. compared Waylon's death in 2002 to the death of a sibling. At that moment, he refrained from making any public statements. He was unprepared. The loss was too recent and intimate. Now, after nearly 20 years, he is prepared to speak, not just to pay tribute to Waylon's legacy, but also to confirm the veracity of their friendship. He chose to commemorate the legacy they created together rather than express sadness in his speech. He added that we arrived at a period when protecting one's sound was an uphill battle, and that Waylon was the hardest fighter of them. He inspired others to fight for their values, just like I did.